Hello and a very good afternoon to you all, and thank you once again for joining me on my Friday afternoon furlough webinar. I'm Angela Clay from HR for UK. I'm an employment law solicitor and also the Managing Director for HR for UK. For those of you who don't know, HR for UK is a leading provider for HR and employment support, including payroll, pensions and health and safety to businesses like yours with over 30 years of experience and 5-star rates on our website. If you haven't already been to our website, I would encourage you to go and have a look, read some of those fantastic 5-star reviews. I am absolutely proud about the reviews that we get because I know hand on heart that the work that we do for our clients and for businesses is second to none. We are not an organisation that goes through a tick box exercise. We do get under the hood. We get to understand your business and we absolutely provide you with the guidance and support that is applicable to you and your business. So, as I said before, I'm an HR and employment law solicitor and Managing Director for HR for UK, and I'm responsible for HR for UK's role in helping businesses get through this crisis. But not only just through this crisis, we are here to support businesses from today and beyond. So successfully surviving the crisis, my vision is to support your business to come out successfully out of the crisis by offering you clear, practical, professional advice that is specific to your business. So again, we pride ourselves in being able to get under the hood of your organisations and give you that handheld support and guidance that is suitable for you, because not everybody is the same, not every business is the same. Some people need additional support and guidance, other people require very little support and guidance. So we understand what you need and we support you how you are best needed. So for those of you who are familiar with this, this webinar is being recorded and we will produce some slides which we will be able to get over to you during the course of the early parts of next week. We encourage you to sort of ask questions either online or offline. We do take your questions and we put them into a Q&A, so please do bring out those questions. They really, really are helpful, not only to us, but to other people who are perhaps wanting to ask that same question, because I think if there's one person wanting to ask a question, I'm sure there are half a dozen other people who are doing exactly the same or want to ask the same question. So please do ask questions and hopefully by the time we get to the end of this, either I will have answered your question and hopefully, but if not, you will get an answer through the Q&As and I'm really hoping to try and get to some of that live Q&A question time at the end. I know the last few webinars that I've done, it's been right up to the wire and I've tried really, really hard to try and get it narrowed down so we can have that live Q&A at the end. So what you will be able to take away from today's webinar is just having an open and honest discussion about how to get your business and your staff back to work. I'm going to talk about some strategies on looking at how to work to have a safe working place, making sure you've got a safe working environment for your staff to work in. I'm going to re-look at some of the strategies that you can use during the furlough scheme. I know holiday entitlement has become a really a hot topic, especially since the government has announced the extension of the furlough scheme until October. Many businesses have their holiday year running from January to December. Of course, a lot of us have gone down into lockdown. Some organisations early March, and the thought and prospect of only reopening completely at the end of October. An entire year has almost gone, and to try and get that holiday in at the last minute, it could prove quite challenging. I'm going to give you some tips and ideas on what you can do to manage that liability and to ensure that you're not left with a huge amount of accrued but not yet taken holiday for your staff. I'm also going to talk about a really hot topic. We all know that the government has expressed their thoughts and feelings that whilst we've still got the pandemic going on, we are encouraged to actually go back to work. It is go to work, let's get the economy going, but of course there are certain categories of individuals who we still need to continue to shield, but there are some that perhaps don't want to come back to work, and I'm really going to spend a little bit of time on that, on how to manage that, because at the end of the day you have got a business and an organisation to run, and you can only do that if you've got your staff in work. Put my teeth in. And then just the last topic that I want to try and touch on, if I've got time, and I think it will be really important, it's about having difficult conversations. It's about having conversations with individuals either in the workplace or particularly now at the moment when you have to do it offline, through Skype, through team meetings, through GoToWebinar, GoToMeetings. There are a whole raft of different platforms that you can use, but how can you use that and still stay on the right side of the law, particularly if you're starting with redundancies? Because I know a lot of organisations are starting to think about that, even though the government has extended the furlough scheme. Businesses are getting a much clearer picture now as to what their businesses look like and what they are going to need to do. So some very tough and very difficult conversations that are going to be had in the next few weeks, and we want to be able to be the ones to support you with that. So as I've said before, please do ask questions. You should have on the right hand side of your presentation, there should be an option for you to be able to ask questions, and you will also be able to download some of the handouts that we've provided. As I said, we will be having some handouts and slides all sent to you during the course of next week. But if you want to download them at the moment, they are available on the right hand side. As I say every week, this is a very fast moving area. The advice that I'm giving you today is only as valid as the information that I'm using at the moment. In the early days of the coronavirus, I know we were giving out advice on one day, and the very next day we were backtracking on the advice because we had been given clearer guidance. Guidance is still coming out on a daily basis from the government, but we are finding that we are getting clarity rather than new guidance coming out. So again, just be aware that this is only as good as it is today. But of course, as always, if you've got any questions or concerns, do get in contact with us, either through our website or giving us a call. A lot of the information will be on our website, but do get in touch. So before I rattle on anymore, let's get this going. Let's start talking about the touch points on helping to get your business and your staff back into work. As I said earlier, we all know that from Wednesday, the government announced that we need to start getting staff back into work. Government has published guidance for employers to help them to get their businesses back into work, but there's still a lot of background work that needs to be put into place before this can actually be operational. As part of the suite of guidances that the government has issued, they've taken 8 workplace settings, and they've given really a lot of thought and consideration on how that guidance can be issued. It is available online. What I will do is I will make sure that those guidance to those specific settings are made available when we send out all our information, but if you just Google it, you will be able to find it. But don't worry, I will make sure that you do get the correct documents. So the 8 settings that they've had a look at includes outdoor work, such as construction sites, to factories, to takeaways. They've also given guidance in terms of vehicles, so employees who have to work in vehicles, office space, and also what steps and actions need to be taken if you have got staff going into other people's homes, because again, you know, we are not just talking about our own environment, we're talking about other people's environments. But every business needs to develop their own best practice on the safest ways for staff to be able to work in their organisation. It's not a one size fits all. It is very much an individual case by case basis. What businesses do need to make sure is that they give the return to work due consideration to make sure that it is a safe environment, even if that means, and probably advisable, that any return is done on a phased return rather than let's all come back to work at the same time, because that's not going to work. The way we used to work pre-lockdown is very different to how we operate post-lockdown, just purely because of the way things have changed. So again, as I say, organisations will be operating very differently, and there's some practical steps that you can start taking now, if you haven't already done so, as part of the implementation of your return to work. So again, I think Boris Johnson was very clear, is stay at home, but go back to work. Quite a big mixed message, but I think the message that he was really trying to get across is go back to work and work from home if you can. And businesses have demonstrated that this can actually be done. There are a lot of work types that there has been a workaround. I mean, I've been absolutely amazed over the last couple of months how businesses have adapted, how businesses have become agile in being able to continue to provide their service or their products to their clients by being adaptable. Of course, if you've got staff that are working from home, take reasonable steps to make sure that that can continue. As I've said before, when we all first started working from home, it was a case of grab everything that you need and off you go. If it is going to be a long-term opportunity to be able to work from home, then businesses do need to go back and revisit, you know, their working from home policies. But there are lots of job types where you can't work from home, and it's in these cases where it has been a clear message that staff should be going back to work. And if you haven't already got individuals asking when are you going to be opening your workplace, you should really be starting to think about this so that you can start getting the economy going. But you have to do it in a safe manner. You can't just come back to work the way you were before. And a starting point for that would be to be carrying out a COVID-19 risk assessment. Ellie Price Tucker, I think your question is, how do you open the attachments? I'm going to get my colleague who's going to try and be able to answer that question on how to download. But don't worry, if you can't do it, we will make sure that we will be sending everything out to you after the webinar. So you know, don't worry too much about that at the moment. So again, talking about the COVID-19 risk assessments, the best way to be able to do this is to consult with your staff. If you've got trade unions, make sure that you consult with them on side as well. Talking to your staff about carrying out the COVID-19 risk assessment has two bonus elements to it. In the first instant, I'm experiencing I don't know if everybody can still hear me. I've just had a little message pop up to say that the sound quality isn't as great as what it should be, but hopefully that will settle down. It was just a little pop up. So if you can't hear me, if you can just put a message into the questions and I will try and gauge. It might just be one or two people who are saying something. Thank you very much. I've had some responses. Everything seems fine. So it must just be me. So thank you for all the responses. If anybody does still experience sound volumes, if you can just let me know so that I can keep an eye on that. But going back to the COVID-19 risk assessments, get your staff involved. Make sure that you talk to them and make sure that you get them involved. As I said, it has a two-pronged positive approach. First of all, it is fantastic for staff engagement. It will make staff feel that they are being listened to, their concerns are being taken seriously, but also you are getting that personal buy-in from them, because if they are part and parcel of going through that risk assessment and talking it through with you, they're more likely to actually turn up for work than if you just implement something, not having them involved, might have that sort of sense of it's not really working for us. So get your staff involved and make sure that it is specific to your business, because it is not a one-size-fits-all. Every business and every organization is different. You might have two organizations that are similar, but there will be the little things that are different from one business to the other. And it's those little things that will make all the difference in terms of getting your risk assessments done. Employers should publish their risk assessments on their website, and indeed, if you've got more than 50 employees, you have to publish it on your website. And again, businesses with more than 5 employees must have a documented risk assessment. If you've got less than 5 employees, you can have a verbal, but it's always best practice to have it written down, documented and evidenced. So if there is ever a comeback on it, you've got something there to be able to support your business. Of course, we've heard it all, we hear it all the time out and about, is maintaining 2 meters social distancing where possible. Now, this might mean that you will have to redesign workspaces to maintain that 2 meter social distancing. If appropriate, you might need to install or implement a one-way walkthrough system to make sure that you're keeping that social distancing. I'm sure many of you have been to the big supermarkets where you almost doing a Silverstone lap around the entire store in terms of making sure that you're having that one-way system. Not only is it a good way of managing the risk of transmission, I'm sure in supermarkets it's another ploy to get you to buy things that you don't really need. But one-way walk-through systems is a very, very effective way of managing the transmission of the disease. Having separate in and out entrances, if at all possible, where you've got multiple doorways. Designate one as an entrance and designate the other one as an exit. Again, changing layouts on how your floor plan is at the moment may go a long way in helping you to be able to support that 2 meter distancing, social distancing. But it's not always possible in every organization to actually have that social distancing. So what you need to do in those circumstances is limit that risk of the transmission. So trying to implement as many things as you possibly can to prevent that transmission from one person to the other. So again, just a couple of examples is, where there are shared spaces, implement barriers. We've got these sneeze screens that you can put in place. You can create a shift pattern. You can minimize the number of team members who are actually in the workspace at the time, so that you're limiting that contact. Ensure that staff work side by side or preferably back to back rather than face to face. So again, where 2 meters apart can't be adhered to, there are other measures and means that you can implement to reduce that, that transmission risk. Cleaning is another very big area of reinforcing cleaning processes. And again, this is different from one organization to another, but some things that you can start thinking about is the frequency of cleaning, paying close attention to those high contact areas. So for example, door handles should be cleaned more regularly than perhaps a boardroom that isn't being used because it is too close in that proximity. Pay close attention to keyboards. Photocopier is a key area where people are coming into an open space perhaps, but you're touching the surface. So again, it is essential to make sure that you have a look at high frequently contact areas and putting in measures in place to be able to have wipe downs, sanitizing gel, etc., to be able to support the hygiene of limiting that risk of transmission. We've talked before about hand washing facilities. It is really essential that we do abide by that 20-second hot water, soapy water hand washing. And again, if you've got toweling towels, change those for the paper towels that can be thrown away, that there isn't that risk of transmission. It's also really important and quite a key measure that you can put in place is putting notices up, because it's not just you it's not just your employees that you need to communicate to, it's visitors that are perhaps coming to your organization. There are free downloadable notices. We've got some really good business partners that we can refer you to if you want something a little bit more permanent, something a little bit more professional perhaps, something a little bit more tailor-made and specific, perhaps have some branding on it. So again, it's really important that those notices are up there so that people can comply with ensuring that everybody is playing their part in reducing that risk of transmission. So we've talked quite a bit about the environment of the staff. So again, as I said, talking with your workers is really, really important because it gets that staff engagement and it gets that buy-in. But before you start opening up, you should start thinking about who should be going to work. Think about how your work is carried out. What risks are there to the jobs and the tasks that need to be carried out? Identify who in your business can work from home, who in your business needs to be in the workplace, and should they really be in the workplace? Providing equipment for employees to work safely and effectively is really, really important. So again, keeping regular contact with staff, again, not only in terms of communication of what's going on, what is expected of them, it also provides a lot of support in terms of mental health and well-being, because a lot of people will have really struggled in terms of the lockdown, the concerns of being infected by COVID-19. And again, it's just having a look at all of that and being really sensible. Look at what is the minimum viable number of the staff members you need in your business, and that should be your starting point. When you're having a look at that, look at the staff that need to be protected. There are some people who will fall into the clinically extremely vulnerable category. Those are those who have to be shielded. Those are individuals who have either received a letter from the NHS or have been advised by their GP to remain at home. They must not work outdoors. They must not work outside of their home. They must stay at home. So again, you need to start thinking about planning for people who are working at home, for someone who is shielding. And again, look at their current role. Is there perhaps something else that they could be doing and continue to work at home? People who are at an increased risk, who cannot work from home, should be offered the safest possible roles to be able to protect them. So it might well be that there is nothing that you can do to get them back into a safe working environment, in which case the option is to leave them on furlough. But do try and look at all ways, even if they are shielding, there are ways and means that you can get them back into working, not necessarily in the workplace, but you can get them back into working. Another aspect that you should be considering is about getting into work, travel into work, and public transport. Again, there's lots of discussions about public transport at the moment. Can people travel alone in their car? Another option, again, is staggering that starting time. And again, making sure that there is a clear guidance on washing hands every time you come into the building and every time you leave the building. So again, that hygiene is really important. Looking at work areas, how can you work, how can you have the most effective organizational workspace to make sure that you're keeping that 2 meters apart? A lot of the stuff I do keep going back to the same things, but do bear with me because it really is important. So 2 meters apart, reorganizing workstations. It may well be that you need to take certain workstations out of use to be able to facilitate that a 2 meter distancing. You might want to actually put some markings on the floor, either permanent markings or using tape, where you can mark out the 2 meter distancing, which is just a visual reminder to everybody, what that 2 meter distancing looks like. And again, just a reminder, avoid that face-to-face contact, side by side, back to back. And if you have to work face-to-face, look at other measures, whether you need masks, whether you need sneeze screens, or other means to be able to make that protection. Again, it is not always possible to keep that 2 meter physical distance. Again, look at perhaps only having one person in a designated area, reducing the number of people in work, looking at what you can do as a minimum viable employee ratio to make sure that your business is still up and running. And again, put staff onto rotation. It doesn't have to be the same people working at the same time. Look at common areas. Common areas is a key thing where you need to sort of consider whether there need to be adjustments made to ensure that you can, keep that social distancing. Good hygiene it has to be at the top of the list. Hand washing facilities with running water, hot running water, soap and paper towels, hand sanitizers, tissues, easily available so as people can get to it at easy access. And again, just constant reminders on what people should be doing. Personal protective equipment will be different for every single organization. It is not a one size fits all. In some organizations, you will need a lot more PPE than what you will need in others. You must continue to provide PPE that you would normally need and use in your organization. So for example, if staff are exposed to wood dust, floor welding fumes, silica dust, etc., steel cap toes, shoes, overalls, whatever the case may be, you must still continue to provide that PPE, but you might need to provide additional support in relation to PPE equipment. I've got loads of notes, but I'm quite conscious of the time, and I really want to get down to, it is all important, but some really key areas where I think, the feedback that we've had, and I do really want to touch on those areas. So again, in terms of getting your staff back into work is really important. Get their staff, get their engagement, get their input, make sure you carry out that risk assessment, make sure that you provide a safe working environment for your staff. And make sure that your business is ready for anybody else who's going to be coming into your workplace, because it's not just your staff, it is any individual who is going to be visiting you. So let's have a look at the furlough scheme. We all were thrown into furlough chaos in March when it was first introduced. Nobody really knew what it meant. The original date was to the 31st of May. That was then extended to the end of June, and more recently it has been extended till the end of October. it's quite important to not think that it's all going to be locked down and the furlough scheme is still going to be available until October, because the government have made it very clear that the scheme in its current form, in other words, the government supporting businesses by allowing them to claim back 80% of wages up to a cap of £2,500 per month, that is going to start scaling back from August. So we can almost have a date in our mind where if you want to do nothing and leave staff on furlough, you've really got until the 31st of July to really start thinking about what you're going to be doing. But the key message is don't wait until then. You need to start thinking about it now and start working towards getting your business up and running in its new form on how it's going to operate going forward. But certainly from the 1st of August to October, we don't know what the details are. There is talks that it is going to be scaled down to perhaps 60% of wages. There is also talk that there is the opportunity to bring staff back in on a part-time basis, because of course at the moment the furlough scheme, it's all or nothing. You either furloughed or you're working. However, I think from the 1st of August they're going to start introducing a shared responsibility with employers and the government in getting staff back to work. So as I said, we almost have a date in mind, the 31st of July, but of course it has been extended to October. So how can you use the furlough scheme to help you manage your risk in terms of holiday entitlement and actually taking holiday? This was a very grey area for a very long time. There is still a lot of discussion going around where some high-flying law firms, I hope I'm not insulting anyone who is listening to this webinar, but there are some high-profile law firms who don't agree with the government guidance on holiday entitlement and pay during the coronavirus, but the government have actually now issued some guidance on that. Right early on, as I say, it was a grey area. It was silent in both the employer guidance, it was silent in the employee guidance. ACAS did a turnaround, U-turn on their guidance, but finally the government has actually come out and confirmed that holiday entitlement continues to accrue during the furlough period, but an employee can request holiday while they're on furlough, and an employer can request an employee to take up their holiday entitlement while on furlough. And the key point is in terms of how is that holiday pay calculated. The holiday pay is calculated how you would normally calculate holiday pay for an employee. Holiday pay is slightly different to normal pay because there are different elements that get included in holiday pay. But if an employee who is on furlough and takes holiday, either because they've requested it themselves or because their employer has served notice on them requiring them to take their holiday, they must receive their holiday pay entitlement for that period. Now, the employer can still claim back 80% of that through the furlough scheme. There is nothing preventing an employer from making that claim, and it's a really, really good and cost-effective way to manage that holiday entitlement during this period. As I said earlier on, we started this process sort of in March when the lockdown was introduced. October, we're looking at that. Some businesses will be closed, perhaps even beyond that period. It's a significant part of the year where a lot of people actually would have taken a holiday. They would have had their summer holidays. They would have gone away. They would have utilised their holiday entitlement. So there's still no reason why an employee cannot take their holiday while on furlough. But as I say, the important thing is that holiday entitlement and that holiday pay. Again, in terms of the information that I will circulate the government guidance on holiday entitlement and pay during furlough. But don't feel that you have to try and read through the guidance on its own. It is here. It is a 7-page document. Contact us. We are here to help you to help you calculate what is holiday pay in comparison to what your furlough pay is, what you can claim and what you can't. So we are here to be able to help you. So managing holiday is quite a cost-effective way of reducing that risk to you as a business owner. Another way that you can use the furlough scheme in supporting you in getting staff back is going on a rotation scheme. I've talked about it before, but there is nothing wrong with getting your minimum viable number of employees and putting them on a rotation. So you have them on a 3-week on perhaps and a 3-week off rotation. It may well be that you have quite a large workforce where you can actually have everybody on a staggered furlough scheme. The key thing to remember is if you are furloughing staff, that has to be for that minimum 3-week period. So if you are going to unfurlough an employee, even if that is for 1 day, you will, when they go back onto furlough, they will need to be refurloughed for at least 3 weeks. There is no requirement to furlough staff on blocks of 3 weeks. It is purely just that minimum 3-week period initially. Once that 3-week period is has elapsed, it doesn't matter how long they are on furlough from there. So again, rotating staff and using the furlough scheme is really cost-effective way of being able to support cash flow in terms of your staffing overheads. So you can leave some off on furlough while you've got the other part of your workforce back. Do remember that if staff do come back in, they get paid their normal wages. Again, I've touched on this before. You might want to consider short-time working. You might want to consider introducing layoff as well. Do remember that you need to have the contractual right to be able to do that before you introduce it and implement it. If you don't have that contractual right, there are ways and means on getting agreement from staff to be able to do that. So again, the furlough scheme, there are ways and means to use it, to use existing employment law to be able to get staff back in. But do remember, it's about getting it right. It's about doing it through the correct legal process to reduce that risk to you in getting it wrong and finding yourself perhaps in an employment tribunal, either for an unfair dismissal or a unlawful deduction of wages. So again, those are really key messages that you do need to make sure that you do get it right. But I've said it before, you're not alone. There is help and support, and we would love to be able to be there to help you and support you with this. So a big question that I think everybody is burning for me to get to is, how do you manage staff who are refusing to return to work? So you've gone through the whole process of looking at your business on how you can continue working. You've had a look at your business and implemented that safe working environment. You've had a look at implementing all that social distancing, proper hygiene. You've done all the hard work. Now you've got your team that you want to come back in. You've spoken to everybody. Everybody is engaged. But when push comes to shove, maybe they're not quite as willing to come back. So let's have a look at a number of different categories of employees. So we've talked about those who are critically vulnerable. So those are the ones who have been told to shield. They have to stay at home. And again, I've talked quite a bit earlier on about how to manage that. If they cannot work from home, they need to stay at home, and you keep them on furlough. It isn't really open for a discussion on should they, shouldn't they. Really, they should be staying at home take advantage of the furlough scheme and leave them at home. You then have the category of staff who are perhaps high risk. They're not quite that clinically vulnerable, but they are still classified as high risk. Again, have a look at what they can do, what they can't do, what measures you have in place, and what that high risk actually looks like, and take an informed decision as to whether they can work from home or whether they can come back into work in a safe environment with all the measures in place, or whether it is a better option to leave them on furlough. Again, using that furlough scheme to be able to protect them and support, you know, to continue to support them. Then you have that level of category where it's none of the above. They're not vulnerable, they're not critically vulnerable, they're not high risk. Perhaps they have got, you know, a young family, that they don't want to catch the virus and spread it. Perhaps they're just really, really fearful for catching the virus. And some employees will just refuse point blank not to return to work. Now, the Employment Rights Act, and I'm not going to throw the act at you, but Section 44 of the Employment Rights Act clearly sets out health and safety for employees. It is an employer's obligation, not only under the Employment Rights Act, but also under the Health and Safety Act and various acts in the workplace where you are under an obligation to provide that safe working environment. But the bar for an employee to say, I don't feel that it is safe for me to come into work, I am fearful for my life, I'm terrified of catching the coronavirus, will be enough to satisfy that fear level of not wanting to come into work. Now, that is their view. You cannot force an employee to come back to work. If an employee is showing resistance about coming back into work, you cannot drag them kicking and screaming to work. But what you can do is you can unfurlough them, because the decision to furlough staff is the employer's decision. It is not an employee right. It is not an employee decision. It is an employer's decision whether or not to furlough staff. So if you have got an employee who is resisting coming back to work, or is refusing point blank coming back to work, in the first instance, you should be talking to them to understand what their fears and concerns are. If you've carried out proper risk assessment, and perhaps you haven't been able to share it with them by engaging them with it, you'll be able to share with them what steps and measures you have got in place. But ultimately, it'll be the employee's decision whether or not they want to return to work, even if you have given them that assurance. And I can probably see most of you wanting to put your head in your hands thinking, the employee's got this all again. It's all about the employee. But it's not, because ultimately, if there is a safe working environment, you have the audit trail of a documented risk assessment, policies, procedures, guidance in place on what you are doing. They can come back into a work environment. If they don't want to, it is unpaid. So it will be unpaid. They can stay at home. It doesn't help you in terms of staffing issues, in staffing ratio, but it will be unpaid. So again, it is communicating with staff. You've done everything that you need to do to make it a safe working environment. If they do not want to come back, it is unpaid. Another alternative is, of course, if they haven't used up all their holiday, they could take it as holiday. But we all know that there is only so much holiday entitlement that the employee is entitled to. And if they've already used up that holiday entitlement whilst being on furlough, there isn't going to be much holiday left. It's only going to go so far. There is going to come a point where holiday is going to run out. And again, the only option then is unpaid. And I think staff will then start really thinking about whether it is really that unsafe to come to work. But from an employer's point of view, make sure that you carry out that risk assessment, make sure it's documented, make sure it's shared with everybody, that there are guidance, processes and procedures in place, so that there is no comeback in terms of saying that it is an unsafe working environment. Again, having these sorts of conversations with individuals is having sensitive conversations. In some cases, you might need to have confidential discussions. And again, it's about having those discussions in a measured environment. Measured environment is probably the wrong word, in an environment that is still compliant with employment law. So again, there are certain conversations that need to be had, but you can't have that face to face. There are other means in being able to have those conversations. So for example, and I mentioned them before, you can have conversations on over the telephone. You can have go-to meetings. You can have Skype for Business. You can have, go-to webinar. There are so many different types of online platforms where you can have those conversations. And again, just bear in mind that those discussions must be done still with the normal employment law principles underpinning them. And sometimes it's quite difficult to have those personal conversations. If you're wondering how to manage those, if you bear with me, we will be having a webinar specifically looking at having those confidential discussions over the new means, the new platforms that we are now presented with, how we have to deal with staff in the current times. Some of those confidential discussions may actually end up being, well, we really need to start talking about redundancies. It's a bit like a book I read many years ago. I think there's perhaps a film about it. We need to talk about Kevin. We need to talk about redundancies. Some organisations simply cannot get away from it. Redundancies are so important because if you get it wrong, it could cost you dearly. So again, you have got the support, you have got the guidance for us to be able to help you. Don't try and do it on your own. It's not the same for everybody. You may be in an organisation where you have gone through a redundancy process before. It may not be the same for this particular redundancy situation. In fact, you might even have done a redundancy situation in your own organisation, but each redundancy situation is different and cannot be copied and pasted. It has to be specific to the circumstances. Again, it will depend on the number of employees that are going to be made redundant. And it's not just the number of employees that are being made redundant in the here and now, it's the number of employees that are going to be made over a period of time, which will have different impact. I've talked before about the process that needs to be followed in terms of more than 20 employees being made redundant. The consultation period is different to those employers who are making more than 100 employees redundant. Again, it's really important that as an employer, you understand in the long term how many redundancies you are going to be making, because that may have an impact on what you might need to do in the lead up to starting that consultation process. You might need to consider appointing employee reps. You might even have a trade union as part of your organisation, in which case you need to engage with them. You need to get them involved in the redundancy process. So it's really, really important that you get that right. The biggest part of a redundancy process is consulting, having that conversation with your employees. How do you have that conversation with employees when they're all at home, or when you are all spread out, keeping that social distancing? Is it possible or feasible to have that conversation in that small workplace? So again, having some clear guidance on how to consult during lockdown is really important, because again, it's your normal employment law principles that still need to be abided by. So again, we are here to help you, and as I said earlier, I will be having a webinar specifically on dealing with that. So it's an encouragement, a bit like going through your supermarket, going up and down. I'm encouraging you to come back and listen to the webinars where we go through these things, providing you with clear steps on what to do, avoiding the pitfalls, avoiding mistakes that can be avoided. So again, just very briefly, the redundancy process. You need to identify, is there a genuine redundancy situation? Some people might be thinking, oh, no brainer, yes it is, but is it? It is individual for every single business, and it is individual for every organization. So again, it's not one size fits all. We cannot just make an assumption that because of COVID-19 there's a redundancy situation. So again, we have to have a look at that redundancy situation. The next step is, of course, advising staff that they are at risk of redundancy. So what does at risk of redundancy mean? We then go through to the selection process. How do you go through that selection process fairly and objectively without predetermining who is going to be redundant? Because of course, in a redundancy situation, it is the role that is made redundant, not the individual. It may well be the individual at a later point, but going through a fair process will actually be able to demonstrate that any potential dismissal as a result of redundancy is a fair dismissal. Of course, there is the notifications, there's the appropriate letters that get sent out, both at at risk, selection process, and at termination of employment. There are key important bits of information that have to be in those communications. And of course, it's providing employees with information about what their entitlements are, what their entitlement is in terms of any potential redundancy package, as well as what their rights are in terms of their right to appeal. As I said, redundancy is such a complex, intricate part of employment law. To get it wrong can be costly, because not only if you've got the numbers wrong, you could be having an automatic unfair dismissal, but again, you might have an unfair dismissal, you might have a deduction of wages claim. So again, it's really, really important to get it right. So again, as I alluded to, my last two areas of discussion is, we are going to be having regular Friday webinars, and I would love to have you join me again. We've got two key exciting topics in the pipeline, talking about having those difficult confidential discussions while on lockdown, and also making sure that any redundancy process that is carried out with as reducing the risk as much as you possibly can. HR for UK, we have got a crisis package available to you. It is very cost effective. If you are going to be comparing the costs, if you had to involve a law firm to be able to help and support you, you will be paying for a solicitor at the hourly rate, which will very soon escalate into the thousands of pounds. An hour's conversation will probably snaffle away any sort of budget that you may have had in terms of legal fees. I'm not discrediting solicitors, because of course I am one myself, but again, law firms can be quite an expensive way in getting support. Again, you might be thinking you have a business consultant who are also quite expensive in terms of helping you with your business. Not all business consultants have the expertise in helping you get through employment matters. They may be brilliant in helping you with looking at your business plan, but in terms of making sure that they get it right in terms of employment law, it again could end up being quite costly. With HR for UK's crisis package, you have the best of both worlds. You've got really experienced consultants who are able to get under the hood and to understand your business, to help you forge a way forward. We will help you identify what changes perhaps need to be made, put you on a roadmap to make sure you get it right. And of course, you're getting it with having a legal background, having that legal expertise to be able to help you. It is a handheld package. We will help you not only with the documentation, we will help you with an aid memoir on having that difficult conversation. It will be structured, telling you what to say, when to say it, looking at your documentation, making sure that you are not exposing yourself to any risk, and any risk that there may be is significantly reduced. So our coronavirus crisis package is available to you. It is really a cost-effective way of supporting your business and making sure that your business is protected. It's a flexible pricing package that is specific to your business needs. It's specific to what you need to carry out, and it is also respectful of your personal financial circumstances, because it is not going to be you know, a one size fits all. I really want to be given the opportunity to get to talk to you, understand what you need to do, and give you what you really need, not what might be perceived that you need. So for more information on our coronavirus crisis package, you can talk to us by contacting us on 01455 444 222. You can email us at info@hrforuk.com, or you can go to our amazing website and click on our coronavirus package there, where we will provide you with some further information. But do get in contact. It really is a cost-effective way of making sure that you do get it right. So that is me for today. I look forward to answering your questions to help your business through this next phase of furlough or unfurloughing or refurloughing, going through all those processes that you need to do. Please, if you want me to cover any specific areas, do drop me an email. I'd love to hear how I can help you and your business get through the coronavirus pandemic and make sure that your business comes out of it at the other side. So just a quick reminder, next Friday, again, 3 to 4, we'll be having another fantastic webinar where we're going to be able to help and support you. Do look out for our communications. Do sign up at our website and make sure that you keep in touch. So let's have a look at these lovely questions. I know we don't have much time left. As always, I've tried to get through as much as what I can. So I think I've answered a lot of these are in relation to my sound, so I'm just going to get rid of those. And that's great. Sound is great. Screen is frozen. Hope you got back on, Joanne. If not, this will be recorded, so you will be able to excuse me, you will be able to get involved in that. And I'm just going to put you on hold for a minute. Sorry about that, everybody. That pesky frog has come back. So let's have a look at a question here. Is it okay to be involving and asking them whilst on furlough? So presuming the question on that is involving staff in terms of a return to work, in terms of getting that risk assessment done, absolutely. Looking at a risk assessment is not work. It's engaging with them on how you can ensure that they are coming back to a safe work environment. So again, do have a look at who's going to be working with it. If you are tasking a manager with the job to be able to collate all that information, that may be considered as work. But if you're just having a conversation with staff while they are on furlough, that wouldn't be considered as as work. But again, it's about having that conversation. It's about keeping in communication. So in simple answer, yes, it is okay to involve staff while they're on furlough, but just have a quick think about who is involved and what their involvement is and whether that will be classified as work. Probably not, because again, just a definition on what work is, it's providing a service or generating income for your business. So involving them on risk assessments and ensuring that there's a safe working environment will probably not be classified as work. But again, you know, just have a look at that. So let's have a look at another question. Would staff need to be taken off furlough in order to contribute to the COVID-19 risk assessment? I think that's a similar question to the one before. You could probably leave them on furlough while you are getting and gathering information in terms of that risk assessment, involving them in relation to discussions that you are having. I would leave them on furlough. As I said, I don't think you need to unfurlough them to you know, carry out that risk assessment. So let's have a look at the next one. I'm doing really well with these questions today, so thank you very much. 0-hour staff working on a production line who are furloughed due to shielding. Should we be looking for other work for them? So again, in response to that question is having a look at why are they shielding? Are they shielding because they are classified as that critical, vulnerable adult, or are they high risk? So again, having a look at what category they fall into in terms of shielding, and also having a look to see, is there work that they can do at home? I think the answer to that, if they're in a production line, perhaps they can't do any production line work from home. So again, if there is other work that they can do, they're not on the extremely vulnerable, the clinical vulnerable category, they should be staying at home. Anybody else, have a look at what you can be doing. If it is possible to provide them with work in a safe environment, then I think you know, that option is available to you. The next question is, will we need to give staff notice that we will be taking them off of furlough? Absolutely. If you don't let them know that they need to come back to work, they will stay on furlough, because let's face it, I think anybody will love to be paid 80% of their wages and still continue to enjoy the sunshine. So definitely, if you are going to be taking staff off of furlough, depending on what agreement you have in place with them, whether you agreed a specific period of time to give them notice, or whether it was immediate notice, you know, you will need to give them notice to come back. What that notice looks like, whether it's immediate or whether it is a defined period, that will depend on what was agreed when you put them on furlough in the first place. Do bear in mind that when you are unfurloughing staff, that they probably need to put in place certain things, you know, domestic matters into order first. So if you are asking them to return immediately, do bear in mind that they may need to arrange childcare issues. They may need to arrange alternative means of getting into work. So again, if it's immediate, just think of the other things that you may need to consider before that. But you know, we do have a template letter that you can use to be able to notify them that they are coming back to, that they've been unfurloughed. The letter does also provide a little bit of information on what you are doing as a business to be able to support them, and also what the options are if they still refuse to come into work. So I hope that answers your question, Sue. Okay, another 0 hours question. Sorry, that pesky frog again. 0 hour staff don't accrue holiday as they are not working. So of course, you know, if there isn't accrued holiday, or if there is no holiday option available to them, then of course you can't offer it to them. You can't bank on future working time, because again, you may be paying someone for time that they may not be with your organization. So I would advise against using future holiday. If the holiday option is not available, I would advise against offering it. So again, if we're looking at alternatives, it would then just be unpaid. So let's just have a look. I'm not too sure how many more questions we've got there. I'll do another 3 questions, and the rest I will pick up on a Q&A document afterwards. So the next question is, can the employer require or request holidays to be taken, and what if the employee refuses? So the first answer to that, yes, an employer can require an employee to take accrued but not yet taken holiday. The requirement is that you need to give twice as much notice as the amount of holiday you are asking them to take. So for example, if you want them to take a week's holiday, you would need to give them 2 weeks notice. An employee can't refuse to take holiday where an employer has requested them to do so. And again, I can perfectly understand that an employee might turn around and say, well, I can't go on holiday anywhere. You know, why must I take holiday? The answer to that is they can't refuse. If that request and that notice to take that holiday, they can't refuse it basically. But as a good employer, listen to their concerns, but do bear in mind the purpose of what you're trying to achieve by requesting them to take holiday. It's managing that holiday liability, and it's managing that accrued holiday post lockdown. So let's have a look. I did say another 2. So do furlough payments need to take into account the new minimum wage levels that came into effect on the 1st of April? So no, because an employee is not working in terms of the Minimum Wages Act, it can mean that an employee who is on furlough can fall below the minimum wage levels. So simple answer to that is no. Payments don't need to take into account the minimum wage levels that came into effect. But do remember that if you do bring them back into work, you have unfurloughed them, they will have to be paid the correct wage. So as soon as they come back into normal work, yes, they will have to be paid correctly. And last question is, can you ask for evidence of the need to shield? Of course you can. So again, it is quite a prescribed notification. It is either a form of a letter from the GP, or perhaps the local authority might have sent the employee a letter advising them to shield. But again, if you are in doubt and you're not quite sure, you can request the employee to provide their consent, that you can write to their GP to inquire as to whether or not they need to be shielded. Again, it's a prescribed process. You know, I would strongly advise that you do get that right rather than just going off. Make sure that you get that consent from the employee before you write to the GP. But yes, if an employee has genuinely been given notification of shielding, there is no reason why you can't ask them to shield, provide you with the evidence that they need to shield. I'm just trying to see how many more questions there are, but I did promise, oh, there's loads more. So this is going to be my last question. I am quite conscious that I've gone way over, you know, the time period, and unless I get the thumbs up to keep going, this will be my last question. So this question comes in: what do we do if a member of staff is unwilling to return due to lack of childcare while schools are shut? Childcare would normally be done by elderly parents who are at risk. What do we suggest? So quite simply, employers should be sympathetic and understanding to childcare responsibilities. We are in a society where, of course, a lot of elderly parents do look after young children, but if an employee is unwilling to return and there is work to do and they can't do that work from home, it is, I'm afraid, unpaid. Or it is a time off for dependents, but of course time off for dependents is unpaid in any event. So whilst it is unfortunate and it does put certain individuals perhaps at a disadvantage because of childcare responsibilities, but from an employer's point of view, it will be as unpaid leave. So I hope that has answered your question. Quick poll, do I do one more question, two more questions? I've been given the nod that I can do two more questions, but as promised, the rest of them we will pull together and we will collate and we will give you a Q&A at the end of it. This is really great. There's some really fantastic questions coming in. So the question here is, can we continue with disciplinary proceedings if an employee is claiming working from home is affecting performance due to stress? Excellent question. I really like these types of questions and start thinking outside of the box. So with disciplinary proceedings, the normal employment law and ACAS guidance will still underpin it. So again, without going into the detail, without all the information, yes, you can continue with disciplinary proceedings, but do bear in mind you will still have to comply with the normal employment law principles supporting that. So again, in terms of poor performance, of course, if it is a third warning poor performance, do take a view before you dismiss. Obviously, if it is a first-time poor performance issue, the appropriate sanction will be either a letter of concern or perhaps a written warning. So again, just bearing in mind, make sure you still comply with those principles of carrying out disciplinary proceedings, but yes, you can do it while someone is in the current climate. So the next question, am I right in saying that if we require them to take leave whilst on furlough, we have to give them the equal amount of notice, 2 weeks if so i.e. 2 weeks if 2 weeks notice? Actually, you need to give them twice as much notice, not an equal amount of notice. So if you want them to take 2 weeks holiday, you would need to give them 4 weeks notice. So do just be mindful that it's not an equal amount, it is twice as much notice. And this is genuinely going to be my last question. As I say, these are brilliant questions coming through. I promise we will collate these all and we will be getting the Q&As together. But this has given me some really good insight on how we can help you with a future webinar. So again, look out for a webinar on how we can help you with answering all of these questions. So just a quick question here. I'm going to get away for this is a very good question. So is the coronavirus package an add-on to the normal membership? So absolutely yes. We do provide you with the support in terms of your membership. So again, there is that support, but the coronavirus package, as I said earlier on, gets in under the hood. So we look at not only the here and the now, we will provide you with the I want to say coaching and the guidance that you will need to give you the confidence to be able to have those conversations with your staff, bearing in mind these are extremely stressful times. So again, if you are an existing client and you want to know how we can work with you to add on the crisis package to your membership, do get in contact, because we will be able to make sure that what we are going to be doing for you is absolutely the right solution for you, rather than just a one size fit all. So absolutely, existing clients, do get in contact on how we can help you with the coronavirus package to ensure that you get that consultancy, because to explain the difference is it will be the consultancy side of it that we will be taking on. So it is definitely well worth having that additional support, and we can certainly work with you in terms of adding it to your normal monthly membership. So very good question there. I am going to turn into a pumpkin. I have been given until 4:15. It is now 4:15. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening to me today. I hope you have found my webinar helpful. Do get in contact with us. Just those numbers again. Our telephone number is 01455 444 222. Speak to me, and I'll be more than happy to help you, or drop us an email at info@hrforuk.com. Again, we will be able to answer those and come back to you, or go to our website, which is www.hrforuk.com. And again, we're always here to help you. You know, this is a time for helping everybody, and I want to make sure that if you are coming to me for my help, I promise you, you will get 100%, 110% of everything that I can do for you. So that's me for today. As always, if there's any questions or queries, do get in contact, and enjoy the rest of your Friday afternoon, and have a fantastic weekend. Thank you, everybody. Bye for now.